episode of Humans of Campus Housing. My name is Leo Llanos, and I'm here with Ben.
Hi, everybody. Ben Wicker. I am one of the hosts for the Humans of Campus Housing, and glad to be here today. Happy New Year to you all. Full-time job is here at Florida State University, working in university housing. Been working in higher education and university housing for over 20 years, and I'm glad to have you all with us today.
And today we are here with Carolyn Dotz. Carolyn is an experienced dynamic professional with a demonstrated history of working in the higher education industry. Hi, Carolyn.
Hi.
How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to jump into today's topic.
Absolutely. I actually got to meet Carolyn last year at a conference that we did at GEHO at Georgia Tech. Carolyn, you've had an impressive career in higher education. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to pursue a leadership career and what are some of your goals moving forward?
Yeah. Oh, great question. So, yes, I had about 16 years in higher education, and I spent all of that time in collegiate recreation. So I was at a couple of different universities, Belmont University, where I did my degrees, and then Cleveland State University up in Ohio was too cold for me, so I ended up getting a job back towards where I'm from in Georgia, and worked at both Georgia State and then Georgia Tech for about 11 years here in Atlanta. And so through all of that time in collegiate recreation, I slowly moved my way up the leader ladder. So I started my career as a grad assistant and ultimately ended as the interim senior director at Georgia Tech's Campus Recreation Center. And it was a phenomenal experience. It was a lot of lessons that I learned about leadership along the way. But in 21, after a year in that position at the top, in the hot seat, I recognized that job wasn't mine. It wasn't a fantastic job. It had a lot of leadership responsibilities built into it, but I was built for something different. And so I ended up leaving higher education and starting my own coaching and consulting company because the workshops, the team atmosphere, getting people to work on leadership skills was something that I was super passionate about. And so I started Strengths on Site, my company. We're starting our 4th year this year. I'm super excited to be growing in the way that we are. But yeah, I actually now, instead of working in higher ed in a leadership capacity, I work with leaders in higher ed on developing soft skills, which I actually hate that term, soft skills, but working on leadership skills that they may not have picked up along the way because there's just not a lot of us out there that are coming in to do this work, especially in higher ed, right? There may be a training or two we get to go to, but having somebody, a dedicated coach, come in to be able to help not just the leader, but their team work on some skills that we just don't pick up in our day-to-day has been so gratifying in my role now, and I hope has been very helpful to those that I've been working with.
I think that's awesome. I'm curious. I've been working in higher education for a long time. My undergrad degree is in business and specifically in management. I came up through a lot of different leadership roles in scouting and at band and just other jobs that I had. And so leadership is something that's really near and dear to my heart and something that I still practice on a regular basis in terms of some of my volunteerism and things that I do there. But also just kind of being a lifelong learner and being someone who is now, has the purview over 300 student staff, over 60 full-time staff. I find that there's a lot of need for the exact things that you're talking about, right? People don't necessarily get training on that. They don't necessarily have a course on that. And so they come in with some significant gaps. And I think that the longer that people put off trying to work on those things or that they don't recognize that they have those gaps, I think it's a larger detriment to the organizations that they're a part of. And so I'd be curious to kind of hear your take on the relationship as you see it between management, supervision, and leadership, and how that is showing up in today's higher education. And like you said, you worked a lot with university housing. So if you can speak specifically to that, then that's fine. But if not, higher education in general is wonderful.
Sure. You said something interesting that I want to make sure we pick up on. You said I practice leadership in various roles. And I love that because I do think leadership is a practice. It is something that we aspire to every single day. It's not something we just get.
Right.
And so calling it a practice, I'm going to borrow that and use that because I love that word. But there is a gap. You're right. I think a lot of times in higher ed is no different than corporate. And from what I've seen working with both realms now in this space, but a lot of times we promote based on time and tenure and not necessarily on the people management skills that leaders need as they move up the organization. And it is such an easy trap to fall into because we assume if you're great at your job, you're going to be great at the next level. But without coaches, without trainings, without experience, and an exposure to some of these leadership pieces, I mean, and we're talking all different stuff from being vulnerable and authentic in your leadership styles to showing compassion to building trust, to providing stability as leaders like that. Those skills don't come in overnight. And I work with Georgia Tech in specific, their housing and res life division, and we've been working in different workshops and different town halls to really just normalize and bring to life that these leadership skills take practice. So I love that word because they're not just handed to you with the job description. And that gap has to be intentionally closed. And it's not up to the leader in the organization to close that gap for the folks. It is truly an individual pursuit to close the gap for themselves. And I think the trend that I see is that a lot of folks, and I'm not going to just bang on higher ed, but a lot of folks in general wait to be handed opportunities. And it's those who really go after the opportunity, who really say, I'm going to put the work in, I'm going to put the practice in to developing myself. Those are the people that gap is so narrow that they naturally step into those roles. And we come to think of them as great leaders. I mean, you look up leadership in, just type it into Google, you're going to get 500 plus different kind of definitions, right? And, you know, I base a lot of my work in Gallup, and because I'm a Clifton Strengths certified Gallup coach and facilitator. And, you know, Gallup even has their own definition of what a strengths-based leader looks like. But one thing we can all agree on is like, we all bring our own unique twist to leadership.
Right.
But it's those who are willing to put in the practice of good leadership skills. And again, we're talking about building trust. Building trust is huge. If you don't have trust and buy-in in your team, you're not going to be a very effective leader. And that's different than being a manager, because that was something you asked about. Being a manager is somebody who can help folks push the buttons they're supposed to push, right? They might even be a button pusher themselves. I've got my thing. I'm going to run this ship. It's very process oriented. Being a leader, to lead, you must have followers. And some people get a little weird about that connotation, but there's an audience when you're leading. You're inspiring. You're not doing people's jobs for them. You might be alongside them, supporting them, but you're out in front. You're casting the vision. You're showing them the direction, the target that you're aimed at. And so there's not a lot of people that are well suited to be out in front like that and truly let go of that management side of leadership. And I think when we really get into the guts of talking about leadership, we have to understand what is the difference between a leader and a manager or a supervisor, right? Supervisors and managers, they are really good in the day-to-day, but leaders are the ones who are out front. They're the ones taking the hits. They're the ones who are steering the ship and figuring out the course. I mean, they don't have the map. They're making the map as they go.
Right.
And so, you know, go ahead.
No, I think that's great, the point that you brought up, because I think, one of the things that I struggle with, and again, I agree 100% with you that it's a skill to be learned, right? And if you're not practicing it, if you're not going out and seeking out those opportunities, then you're going to be deficient, right? And so I I also agree with you. I always start when I talk about leadership with that followership portion, right? Like without followers, there's no leadership to be had. And so I really sometimes I find myself at odds in the position that I'm in as a senior level leader and manager and supervisor with that gap that exists between, okay, I have this positional power, right? Uh, and I try really hard in speaking with my staff at the beginning of the year and talking about those very things that you were talking about being vulnerable, about being authentic, about owning your mistakes, knowing that you don't have to have it all, and surrounding yourself with a team of individuals who can fill in those gaps, right? And trying to guide them into that area. But at the same time, I have found in recent years that regardless of how many times I stand in front of my team, and this is my professional team, that I still have trouble making those connections with them on that level that you're talking about by being vulnerable and everything, because I carry this title of director, right? Or in my role with CHO and in a regional capacity, I carry this role as president, right? And so there really is a discrepancy there in trying to not slough off or push down that title, right? But to allow my own personality and my own preferences, my own leadership style to shine through in those moments. And it's frustrating sometimes, right? Because
Sure.
I think what I want people to see is that I don't have to have all the answers, but I do want to invest in my people, right? And I want them to then try to role model that behavior and lead their student staff or their entry level staff or whomever, whatever level they're at, in the same way. And it's different for everybody, right? There's no one size fits all, and it is one of those things that you need to play to your strengths. But I find that one of the things in higher education right now is that there seems to be this discomfort level between our graduate, our entry level, even our student staff about wanting to step into some of those roles sometimes. And I'm curious if you've seen that in groups that you've spoken with or met with.
That's interesting perspective. Yes and no. I think, and I want to kind of pick up on what you said there about empowering your leaders, not doing the job for them. I think, kind of to answer your question, some of this misalignment that I'm seeing is there's a lot of folks who expect their leader to know every single thing about their job. And if you're leading a team that's more than maybe 3 people, there's no way you're going to know everything about a person's job. That's why they're in that role, so
Right.
that they can do the job to their best ability, and you can lead everybody in the same direction, right? As a leader, you're called to create other leaders, not just these followers who are going to do everything that you're doing in the exact same way. If that was the case, their job would be redundant. Why are you wasting money on that role? And I try to get teams to understand this, especially when teams come to me with a lot of conflict and saying, well, this leader doesn't do or know what I do in my job, and they're not doing things the way that I would do them. And I'm like, well, are you leaving space for each other to do the jobs you're both hired to do? Because this job is very different than this job. And you can lead from any position in the organization. I mean, let's talk about that. But when you're talking
Right.
about hierarchy leadership of being at the top, you're not there to do everybody's job. And so I think some of the reluctance that you're talking about and seeing people wanting to step into different roles is there's a lot of fear in the unknown. And I think people don't step into roles because they're scared. I also think that there's just not enough equipping of our staff of things outside of their day-to-day functions to feel confident in stepping into this next position of power. And all the focus and hype on, quiet quitting and, everything post-pandemic. Things really escalated post-pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, teams got virtual, and then therefore they got disconnected. And we've seen this even with like social media. You can have 1,000 friends on social media and still be lonely, right? Because that connection piece is truly not as authentic as we think it is. And so there's a couple different thoughts all at once, but
No, that's great.
Yeah, to pull it together is I think the trend is we're seeing, especially some of these younger generations go, I don't want to deal with some of the things that these leaders are dealing with. And therefore, I'm good where I'm at. I want to be an individual contributor. I want to push the red button. And that's as high as I want to go. Right?
Sure.
And so how do we inspire any generation, not just the younger generation, any generation to say, anybody can lead and anybody can learn these skills and put into practice, but you got to do the reps, right? I mean, I come from collegiate recreation. I've spent my career in health and fitness industry. You don't get fit by sitting on the couch and wishing you were fit. You get fit by putting the reps in, taking the walks, doing the bicep curls. Right. You have to put the reps in, just like within leadership. You have to put that practice in, and it can't just be your day-to-day. It has to be above and beyond. And I think, again, a lot of these trends that I'm seeing is I don't want to get paid for anything that is not exactly in my job description. I don't want to take on extra responsibilities. Well, yeah, that's how leaders are born and bred, is they're taking on these extra roles. They're sharpening their teeth. They're putting into practice every single day the next level of steps that they'll have if they want to get into that next role. And I just think, to answer your question, folks aren't willing to do that extra, do that boring, do that rep to have what it takes to move up. And so we're kind of seeing this slowdown of those next positions being filled.
Yep. 100% agree.
I think you've given a lot of advice, Carolyn, but I did want to ask one thing to close us off. I did want to ask you one last question.
Sure.
What excites you most about the future of campus housing, and what role do you see leaders like yourself and many others playing in shaping that future?
Oh, such an important question. Thanks, Leo. So campus housing, one of the reasons why I love working with them as clients, especially at Georgia Tech, y'all are leading truly the next generation. You are such a fundamental piece of a college student's life. You are providing, have a hierarchy of needs. You're providing shelter and safety and sometimes even the food, right? That these students will eat, and you are the university experience when people think back to the university. I am so excited that we are getting kind of out of this COVID pace and hopefully back into a little bit more traditional on campus, in-person type way of living again. And I just only seeing that more hybrid type dynamic, hopefully kind of pendulum swinging back towards more of that in-person feel with that hybrid flexibility. And I think if we can figure out truly what that kind of momentum and rhythm feels like, housing is set to be the center stage where campus life happens. And so to grow and facilitate the practice of leadership in the housing space, I think housing is one of the leaders, if not the leader, of well-being efforts across campus. And I say that as a campus recreational alumni and lover of life, right? Like, I'll be campus rec till I die. But the wellness, the well-being initiatives that can come from housing are huge and total for the student body that runs through there. And so I'm just super excited that this particular group on campus has such immense power and hold for that universal experience that students are craving when they come to campus. And so, again, if I could leave one thing, it's leadership is a practice. And those who are going to thrive and the communities and campuses that are going to thrive are those that put that into practice every single day.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carolyn. Carolyn, where can people find you? And if there's anything else that you want to plug, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Y'all, they can find me on LinkedIn, Carolyn Dodds. You can also find me on my website, strengthsonsite.com. I'm sure we can put that in the show notes or something somewhere. I'm also on Instagram at Strengths on Sites and Facebook. So I feel like I'm pretty accessible. I love when folks either drop me a line or reach out to me on social media to say, hey, let's connect. And then, yeah, I love working with teams. So if you feel like your team needs some help in this putting leadership into practice or teaming better together, like that's my jam. That's my love language. I love just that team environment. I do some one-on-one coaching, but if I'm really being honest, like the team atmosphere is where I thrive. So I would love the opportunity to work with you and your team.
Thank you so much, Carolyn, for being here on the podcast. And with that being said, Ben, why don't you take us away?
Sure. Well, we thank you all for tuning into the Humans of Campus Housing podcast today. It's always our hope that our conversation has helped you in some way, connected to your personal or professional experiences, or that it inspires you to take this back and continue or further the discussion. If there are any topics you'd like to see us hear us discuss, please reach out to us and let us know. And of course, we hope that you will like, share, and subscribe to the Humans of Campus Housing podcast. In this crazy world, please take care out there, look after your students, care for your people, and most importantly, take care of yourself and find ways to daily refill your cup. A special thanks again to Carolyn Dodds and Strengths on Site for being here today and sharing your expertise with us, and for all of you for taking time with us. For Leo and everyone associated with the Humans of Campus Housing podcast, thanks for joining us.